Hello ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to have a look at the Aurignacian culture. Part of the Upper Paleolithic period. We've looked at the Gravettians and the Neanderthal within this period. However, I found something with the Aurignacian that simply disturbs me, and it needed to be looked into, ladies and gents. This Upper Paleolithic, late Old Stone Age culture coincided with the last glaciation. It seems to be safe to assume that in this period Siberia and the subarctic areas of Europe belong to the same civilization. The differentiation between Central Asia and neighbouring cultures did not begin until Neolithic times, and was marked by tremendous technical progress and a wide diversification of cultures. Prior to that, the Aurignacian covers all human settlement between Iberia and the Malta site, which is located 40 kilometers 28 miles to the northwest of Irkutsk, and quite possibly even further east than that. It is contemporary with the Bardostonian culture of the Middle East. The Aurignacian succeeded the Neanderthal-led Chattel-Perronian culture. There may be some crossover finds that are assigned, but essentially that was the final expression of Neanderthal mastery of Europe. The humans of the Aurignacian, don't know whether that's phrased right, but the humans of the Aurignacian displaced Neanderthals, consigning them to slow extinction in southern Spain. Or did the Neanderthals actually just have to go there because they were struggling with the cold weather? That remains to be seen for me. It is the first human culture outside the Middle East because it saw the first expressions of culture, the creation of artistic figurines and cave paintings, such as like that we've looked at from the Neanderthal and the Gravettians, the Venus figurines and so on. The genetic features of the Europeans in the Ice Age have been worked out in greater detail in the past few years by researchers. They've largely concluded that all Europeans are descended in part from an early founder population of Aurignacian humans who lived in what is now Belgium some 35,000 years ago, or 33,000 BC. The researchers further concluded that natural selection has played a role in making the Neanderthal ancestry of modern Europeans less prominent over time. It seems that Neanderthal DNA in Homo sapiens was rather unhelpful and has been weeded out by nature. Or was the DNA changes? Were they not surviving, so they needed a better DNA strand? So Aurignacian could have well mated with the Neanderthal to produce a Gravettian, as we've looked at prior on the Gravettians episode. Patterns of migration were also revealed, suggesting that these movements were quite intricate, possibly as complex as modern migration patterns. Analysis of genes carried out by Ice Age Europeans shows, amongst other things, that they had dark complexions and brown eyes. Only after 14,000 years ago did blue eyes begin to spread, and pale skin only appeared across much of the continent after 7,000 years ago. Born by early farmers of the Sesquillo culture, the early European populations of the Aurignacian and its intermediate successors possessed more Neanderthal ancestry than present-day people. Of course, we contain 2% Neanderthal DNA, so we're lucky to be here because of the Gravettian and the Aurignacian, in my opinion. Consistent with the idea that much of the DNA has been inherited from Neanderthals had harmful aspects, scientists think this inheritance was progressively lost through natural selection. The Aurignacian genetic signature disappeared from a broad sweep of Europe when the Gravettians arrived. So when the Gravettians came, the Aurignacian seemed to disappear. The latter displaced them and seemed to replace them entirely. But the Aurignacian culture resurfaced 15,000 years later. So the Aurignacian were here, ladies and gentlemen, but then they disappeared for 15,000 years. Came back in the Red Lady of El Morón cave in northern Spain. This tall, robust woman was a member of the Mogollonian archaeological culture which expanded northwards from southwestern Europe as the ice sheets of the most recent ice age melted. In Central Asia, the Auragnacian developed into the Malta-Buret culture, which witnessed the first true technological differences from the cultures of the West. So not only did the Auragnacian and also the Gravitian get out there, because we see the Terran mummies, there are also other cultures that we can look at later on in the episode, which might well be the Aurignacian coming back to talk to us, ladies and gentlemen. Where did they go for 15,000 years? Now, the Aurignacian also had the Venus figurine, so this has come from Neanderthal, Aurignacian, or should we say Chattelperonian for the Neanderthal. And it seems that the Aurignacian and the Neanderthal had the Gravitian. Now, then the Auragnacian disappeared. Where did they go, ladies and gentlemen? What would you do? Where would you hide for 15,000 years? That's what we're going to look at today, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We're looking at Science Direct today. You can go and have a look yourselves and take a look at what we're looking at. I'll put you a link in the details below. Now, we have to look at the Gravitian initially, who were the spawn of the Auragnacian. So they're obviously their teachers. Now, what were they teaching the Gravitian? Let's have a little look. The field and laboratory work carried out in recent decades has substantially changed our vision of various aspects of the Gravitian and Cantabrian region and Western Pyrenees. The objective of this work is to carry out a critical synthesis of the available data for the lithic industry of the Gravitian in this region. According to raw material procurement, exploitation strategies and typological markers, thereby several aspects are of importance. The alternating availability of high quality raw material, where two territories can be divided, one to the west, where raw material acquisition is showing a wide range of raw materials, notably flint, quartzite and quartz, ladies and gentlemen, and one to the east, where assemblages are completely dominated by a single raw material, flint. The great similarity between different reduction strategies, mainly in relation to flint, and existing polymorphism throughout the territory in case of the tool types, which within protrude two typological groups, back elements and burins, notably the no-ills burins. The latter are massively present in the eastern part of the Cantabrian region and the Western Pyrenees. This variability does not seem to correspond with the chronological phrases, but has to probably be understood in functional terms. Recent works undertaken in the Saber Valley, northeast Portugal, revealed an important Upper Paleolithic sequence to the north of the Douro River in a region with little Paleolithic evidence. Previous Upper Paleolithic occupation evidence in the region had only been identified and studied in the Coa Valley, to the south of the Douro River. Foz de Medel site is located in the interior area of Iberia on the fringe of the Spanish Meseta, in the transition to the Atlantic facade. The work accomplished allowed the identification of Gravitian levels. The Gravitian lithic assemblage from Foz de Medel presents different Gravitian characteristics when compared with other more traditional Gravitian assemblages, namely from Portugal, sharing some features. The objectives of the reduction and the strategies applied show big peculiarities which can be related mainly to the geological context and the raw material sources. The scarcity of biogenic chert and availability of other local siliceous rocks, such as hydrothermal cherts, rock crystal and other types of fine quartz, have played a major role in the choices made by prehistoric humans. Quartz in its several varieties was the chosen raw material for knapping, reaching more than 80% of the total collection. As a result, the regional environmental context and human strategies show great variability between Fosna-Medal and the Coal Valley Gravettian assemblages and other Gravettian assemblages where CHER is easily available. Now, located in the interface between Paris and the Rhine basins and the more northern territories of Europe, Belgium contains several Gravettian occupations, both open air and in caves. The available documentation is unfortunately limited by the earliness of the excavations conducted. Stratified records in the karstistic context, primarily excavated in the 19th century, are particularly affected. The analysis of the Gravettian lithic technological behaviours can, however, rely on two open-air sites excavated in the late 20th century, which provide more rigorous data. Now, why were the Gravettians after so much quartz, ladies and gentlemen, of the ancient alternative view? Seems very strange to me that the Aurignacian actually taught them to go and mine it in its extremity as much as they can. Why would they be doing that, ladies and gentlemen of the ancient alternative view? Yeah, we're at exactly the same web page here, ladies and gentlemen. It's still on Science Direct, Chapter 5, Quartz-Based Piezoelectric Materials. Again, just an overview like we've been looking at, otherwise we're paying £80 for the entire book, but this chapter examines the piezoelectric characteristics and common applications of quartz crystal. Section 5.1 covers the discovery of quartz crystal piezoelectricity. Wonder whether we've found it a bit earlier, ladies and gents, including its structure and its difference from other piezoelectric materials. Section 5.2 compares natural quartz crystal with artificial quartz crystal and explains the methods and specifications for artificial quartz crystal growth. Really? Section 5.3 introduces typically applied quartz crystal plates for vibrators and shows actual cutting angles. These vibrators include the most popular AT cut thickness, shear mode and tuning fork bending mode, and their characteristics such as frequency and temperature are all explained in detail. This section also shows examples of quartz crystal miniaturization using another cutting method developed by River Electric Corporation. Demonstrates applications and standards for the quartz crystal vibrators and oscillators described throughout the chapter. Well, anyway, what we're looking at basically is this, the quartz crystal. Now, when we look at this, it can be used high frequency for oscillators. This is today in our terms, and you can go in, you can have a look and see how current is actually put through this and how you get what's called the piezoelectric effect. Now, we're not going to go into detail specifically about this part at the moment. I'm going to show you a small video. We'll big up this guy's video, go and watch it. I found it off Uchronia Utopia Dave. Thanks very much, Dave. And this gentleman shows us with normal household items, specifically that you can get yourself really, and you could still make this piezoelectric effect. Now let's go and have a look at that, and I'll see you on the other side, ladies and gentlemen. Now this is Colin's lab, homebrew piezoelectric. I think you'll find it absolutely superb. You imagine what you can do with real quartz, ladies and gentlemen, but have a watch of this.
This is a piezoelectric transducer. It responds to physical pressure by producing an electrical charge, which makes it really handy as a sound pickup among a lot of other uses. Now, if we apply an electrical charge to it, it'll change shape slightly. If we pulse a charge very quickly on and off, we can use piezos to create sound. That's enough of that. Now, I find piezos amazing. The material used on most of these is a special ceramic, but we can produce our own piezoelectric crystals really easily. Let me show you.
Potassium sodium tartrate, also known as Rochelle salt, is a piezoelectric crystal which can be prepared using two common ingredients. Sodium carbonate, aka soda ash, can be found at most art supply shops, it's a dye fixer, and potassium bitartrate, aka cream of tartar, can be found in the spice section of many grocery stores. First, I'll mix about 7 ounces of the potassium bitartrate with 1 cup of water in a Pyrex measuring cup. Then place the measuring cup in a saucepan of water and heat it until it's just simmering, around 180 degrees Fahrenheit or so. Once it's simmering, add a half teaspoon of soda ash to the mix. As you can see, this causes quite a bit of fizzing and bubbling action, so I'll wait for that to calm down a bit and then stir before adding another scoop. Then repeat this process until the solution stops bubbling and turns clear. This happens pretty abruptly, so it's hard to miss. While the solution is still hot, pour it through a coffee filter into another Pyrex container. This will remove any remaining chunks of soda ash. After letting it cool for a few minutes, I poured the liquid into a plastic storage container, covered it loosely, and let it stand overnight in a cool area. The next morning, I was greeted by big clusters of Rochelle salt crystals. A lot of them, too. After pouring the remaining liquid into another container for possible future use, I dried off each cluster. Now, I just need to pick one out for testing. This one looks pretty good. I added a bit of foam padding and foil tape to my Panavice jaws so the crystal can be held somewhat gently while providing an electrical contact to each side. Just need to hook up my oscilloscope probe, mount the test crystal in place, and I'll use the handle of a small screwdriver to, well, hit it, or apply mechanical pressure. And yes, it's definitely kicking out an AC voltage for every hit. Wow, that still seems crazy to me.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a homebrew piezoelectric.
Now, if you just type in yourself quartz gravity and figurines, then you're going to see quite a few different things made from quartz. Now, whether they were using the properties for piezoelectric is for you guys to decide, but we can trace that back. We've looked at this before, and it's not the only hallmark, but gravity and carvings around 20,000 years old relate to later goddesses, i.e. Venus. Well, the Venus figurine came from before the Gravitian and can be found with the Auragnacian, and we've also looked at the hashtag or lozenge for reference to our hallmarks as well. Now, you can trace back the lozenge all the way back to 40,000 years to the Neanderthal, and my research team, Andrew Ancient History Criticisms, Dave Uchronia, Utopia, Ziggy Dan, Shermanator Osborne, and Crispin of the Ancient Stone Nub Language. However, I've done a lot of work on this with Dave at Uchronia Utopia, who's fantastic with the monitoring of the Gravitian, and also helped me a lot with theories with regards to this episode too. So cheers, Dave. Now, the later goddess and the bull cults, we all have referred this as late as Egyptian times to Hathor, and the Milky Way as the bull cults. So you can trace back the star alignment engineers like the Gravitians, the Aurignacian, and so on through these hallmarks, ladies and gentlemen. So what I decided to do was to see whether we could find a culture like the Auragnacian who had come back and given any of the hallmarks that we can find from around the world. I'm just showing you though some of the distribution here of where the Gravitian actually went, and you can see on there that they went everywhere looking for quartz in the European areas. Now, could they have made it to America? Yes, of course they could. The world was a lot smaller place, 400 feet of water down. We could have travelled via the Bering Strait. You had Mogollon next to Great Britain, where you could have got to Great Britain, Europe and so on. It was a bit different a world back then. I'm not saying we could have walked it easily, but maybe the Gravitian were actually training for the conditions and sending specific people to different parts of Europe, i.e. Italy and so on, and all the way across to the more colder climates for cold weather training. We've looked at whether the Gravitian in prior episodes could have been part of the Tarim mummies, and that means they would have got to China. Now, is there another culture that represents the Venus culture, the star alignment culture, the Gravitians, and significantly jump out at me with the hallmarks 15,000 years after they'd gone? Well, there is, ladies and gentlemen, of the ancient alternative view, and there's more than one hallmark that we can show you here today, and that's where we're going to go next. So let's have just a little scroll down and show you some of the quartz found. Look here, rock crystal stone tools made by the Neanderthals. Now, these guys obviously knew the same sort of properties as well. Although they were struggling for survival, they were still around when the Auragnacian were there, so obviously secrets were passed from one to the other. Get it out of your minds that these guys were very simple hunter-gatherers, because that was not the case. Now, you've also got, with the Auragnacian, plenty of Venus cultures. We've also got the cow here with the Auragnacian, and if you notice on there, look at what we've got there, the lozenge. So at this point in time, they were marking the hallmarks, ladies and gentlemen, and it was passed downwards from the Neanderthal to the Auragnacian and then to the Gravitian. But where did the Auragnacian go, ladies and gentlemen? So, where did they actually reappear, ladies and gentlemen? Well, the Mogollon origins remain a matter of speculation. One model holds that the Mogollon emerged from a preceding desert archaic tradition that links Mogollon ancestry with the first, or late Pleistocene, prehistoric human occupations of the area around 9000 BC. Bear that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, which coincides very similarly to the re-emergence of the DNA signature of the Aurignacian. Cultural distinctions emerged in the larger region when populations grew enough to establish villages. Well, when I show you what the villages look like, ladies and gentlemen, along with the hallmarks, I'm sure that you'll see that this culture is far more advanced than what we were led to believe. Now, in Mexico, investigators have found more than 3,000 Jornada Mogollon rock paintings or pictographs. They have documented images of the Tlaloc storm god, the Mesoamerican Quetzalcoatl plumed and horned serpent deity. Now, does this remind you of anyone, ladies and gentlemen, of the ancient alternative view? Because it certainly looks a little bit to me like she who should not be mentioned, Hathor. Now, the cow is related to the Milky Way, the celestial Milky Way, and if the gods and goddesses of Egypt walked to Egypt, as is said by Thoth, ladies and gentlemen, who walked with the emerald tablet, It's very similar that others did the same too, because these hallmarks are actually there for all to see. However, let's have a little look, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the Mogollon were sky watchers. Although we can read little more than isolated fragments of the spiritual stories suggested by symbols on the stone, we can assume or surmise that many Mogollon religious ceremonies revolved around the annual advances and retreats of the sun, very similar to other areas. Celestial events in the night sky, well, as we've seen by the Auragnacian and the Gravitian, they were all watching the night sky, maybe cataclysm. Now, the Mogollon, ladies and gentlemen, have got some very, very interesting hallmarks that I'd like to show you. Now, if we go and have a little look at those. This is the home of where the Mogollon were. This is not a farmer's backyard. Look at how they've tunnelled into this cave system. Just look at how they've tunnelled into the mountain. Now, I wonder how subterranean that is. We've looked at the power today needed to create such a home, because you're not tunneling into this with copper chisels, sticks and stones, ladies and gentlemen. Now, also the Mogollon had these very strange non-flight bird potteries that look like this. Notice the lozenge in the middle there, and also very similar here, you've got the lozenge in the middle, a very strange hole here, also a non-flight bird. That non-flight bird crops up all over the ancient world, ladies and gentlemen. Now, although this is a small image, do you notice the lozenge in the middle? And how far back we can trace that lozenge, remember? 40,000 years to the hashtag. Non-flight bird with a very strange knocked out circle in the middle. We'll come to that a little bit later, but keep your eye on this non-flight bird. Now, if you look at this plate, do you remember the hashtags? The little small lozenges? Well, they, ladies and gentlemen, do go back to the hashtag that we studied with the Gravitian and the Auragnacian. And I find these hallmarks very hard to distinguish that they were not together advanced civilization around the world, and this could well be the Aurignacian. Now, do we notice the incised motif with the non-flight bird? Well, you guys must take a look at this. This is on the Mogollon site, the non-flight bird and the incised motif. Now, we have seen this elsewhere, ladies and gentlemen. Now, if I just cut across to my Pinterest account. So if we go across to the incised motifs, this is my Pinterest, Phillip Corbett. If you'd like to go across and have a look, you can see them all over the world. Sumerian examples of the incised motif and so on. They're on Peruvian examples on the Yangshan block that we've seen. They're all over the world, ladies and gentlemen. So that incised motif with the non-flight bird that we've found with the Mogollon culture. Now, the incised motif was everywhere, and we've also got the non-flight bird everywhere as well. I've just took a few examples for you to take a look at, and the bulk of them, of course, are at Göbekli Tepe, which is a star alignment site, ladies and gentlemen, which, funnily enough, we can find the lozenge and the non-flight birds on. If you look on the examples, they're all there. We're going to have a little bit of a look at some other examples as well, ladies and gentlemen, which correlate the non-flight birds and the animal carvings at Göbekli Tepe to the stars. Now, I find it strange that the Aurignacian, the Gravitian, the Mogollon, and the people that constructed Göbekli Tepe, which I'm going to say was the Gravitian, did exactly the same things with exactly the same motifs. The non-flight bird, the lozenges, they are all around the world. And the Mogollon, ladies and gentlemen, in Mexico, fits the bill identically to who came back as the Aurignacian, ladies and gentlemen, of the ancient alternative view. And using these hallmarks, we can trace them back to Mexico 15,000 years later. I wonder what your opinions are of the Auragnacian DNA signature disappearing completely for 15,000 years. Did they use piezoelectricity? Maybe for power? To mine for more quartz? What were they doing with that quartz? Was that quartz to get them away from our planet, or to help them bury into it, ladies and gentlemen of the ancient alternative view? Because using the hallmarks, we can follow them directly, and they seem to span all the way across the earth. They're gravitating all the way across Europe, and it seems as if the Aurignacian have been sent at times to help us. Where did they go and where did they come from is still up for debate, but I hope I've helped you today, ladies and gentlemen, with the fact that we've found power and the fact of piezoelectricity. We found quartz mining through the gravity, and that the Aurignacian actually taught. And when their DNA signature left, ladies and gentlemen of the ancient alternative view, for 15,000 years, we found them in Mexico, turning up alongside the hallmarks in the Mogollon culture. There is no doubt in my mind that the connections are worldwide to the star alignment engineers. We've looked at it, ladies and gentlemen, on the stone of language. We're looking at it backward to the cultures, including the Auragnacian, the Gravitian, and the Neanderthal. The Mogollon, the Inca, everyone were watching the stars. But why, ladies and gentlemen? Was it for cataclysm? I think it could have been. But also, could we be monitoring a specific set of people that come and go to help us? The evidence is there, ladies and gentlemen, that they could have tunnelled underground, and I'd like to believe that they did, and they were mining for quartz. But 15,000 years seems a long time to me. I wonder what your thoughts are, ladies and gentlemen. So where did the Mogollon go, ladies and gentlemen? We're on the Harvard Gazette here, and it says they successfully farmed corn, beans and squash until they disappeared abruptly around 1150 AD, along with many other people living in the southwest at that time. Something happened. They ceased to make villages. They ceased to make pottery. We lose them in history, said Peabody, Museum Director of Collections, Stephen LeBlanc. Don't you find that funny, that they completely disappeared, just like the Auragnacian, ladies and gentlemen? Love to hear your views. One other thing to look at, ladies and gentlemen, with the Mogollon culture is that they were studying the mineralogy of a meteorite. Now, why on earth would they have had a meteorite the size of a front door, if not bigger? And have we ever seen one this size? They were studying mineralogies of something, ladies and gentlemen, and I find it intriguing that the Mogollon had meteorite found alongside their culture. What a fascinating piece of evidence. So not only did the Aurignacian pass down quartz technology, they also passed down meteorite technology, as in the mineralogies of the stone. Now, where did that meteorite that size come from to the Mogollon culture? I'd love to hear your opinions, ladies and gentlemen of the ancient alternative view.